Yo, what's going on, guys? Arekkz here. Welcome back to another video for Godfall, and today I want to show you some really cool gameplay. If you guys caught my recent Godfall video where I had another interview with Dick Hayne, who is of course the technical producer at Counterplay Games, we had another chance to chat and just kind of talk about loads of different mechanics. If you've missed it, I'll link it down below. It's kind of like a really in-depth interview. We speak about weak points, breach, soul shatter, polarity attacks, just like so many things. Even get a look at like another brand new Valor plate. But amidst that, I also had some gameplay that I kind of put into that interview, and for the most part obviously you just kind of saw it in passing whilst we were speaking. But in this video today I want to give you a chance to watch that. I'm going to kind of give you some context and talk about some of the different kind of core mechanics that we touched on in that interview, but then after that I want to just let you watch it so that you can just hear it, see it, because honestly I think when it comes to games like these, when you see things in trailers and you see it supercut, it's quite hard to get an idea for the flow, but when you actually see like an unedited chunk and just sort of see combat back to back, honestly things start to fall in place. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. We're talking mechanics, we're talking gameplay, talking weapons. So if you guys do enjoy this, like would be super appreciated. Comment down below if you guys have got any questions. But let's start at the top. So this clip you're going to be seeing in the background is of the Greatsword. There's quite a few things that go on in this clip. We of course have a weak point attack, we have breach, and we have soul shatter. So to kind of give you like a quick top level summary in case you missed the interview, weak points basically are this mechanic that happens when you're fighting a monster, or fighting an enemy should I say. Then when they kind of get close to being like critically wounded, a weak point will reveal itself. And a weak point isn't just something that you attack for more damage, it's something you need to manually aim at. So you'll actually see this kind of a clip where the Greatsword is thrown at like this weak point that appears, and it only appears temporarily. It's not just like a big gaping hole that you can just, you know, waltz over to slowly. You do need to, there's like an element of mastery to it basically. Following that, of course, breach is basically like your stun mechanic. So when you're fighting some of the heavily armored enemies, it's basically your means to put them into a vulnerable state that you can then perform takedowns on. So breach, typically, if you want to get to this state most effectively, you'll perform heavy attacks and follow up with quick light attacks. And then what you'll actually see, while we don't have the UI in this clip, typically beneath an enemy's health bar, you will have a breach bar. And once that's full, you can then perform a takedown. Good way at dealing with heavily armored enemies. Meanwhile, soul shatter, if ever you see in the gameplay clips that some of the enemies basically just burst into this kind of like bright, ethereal sort of spiritual glow or goo, or however you want to describe it. Basically, if they explode, this is a soul shatter, and the way that this works is there'll basically be a soul shatter bar that is kind of on top of the health bar, and as you deal damage to an enemy, you accumulate a bank of damage that can then be consumed with a heavy attack. So you have to initiate a soul shatter with a heavy attack, which is R2, and if that bank of damage is larger than the enemy's remaining health, you will soul shatter the enemy. So basically, it's another good way to, you know, if you're dashing around like a big group of enemies you've been kind of putting some work in, it's a good chance to finish them off. So there are a few things that you see in this clip, so I'll let you guys watch this one and then we'll pick up for some more stuff. Now, following on from there, we of course have Polarity attacks, which is a really cool system in this game that is basically designed to encourage weapon swapping. Obviously, they did say that, you know, you can play the game however you like, so if you want to just lean more into one, then you still can. But the idea with this is that if you can't choose between one of 5 weapons, you can at least choose a second one. The idea is that you have a weapon, and the one that you're not using at the time is charging up, and then once that charge maxes out, you'll have a little UI element that will basically be like this electrical effect, this kind of bright blue glowing effect for the icon of your weapon. And then when you swap to that weapon, you will unleash a shockwave and it will boost your current weapon damage by 20% for 30 seconds, which is quite a sizable amount of time. Obviously, in an ideal setup, if you have like a perfect build, you could be in a position then where you could basically build up polarity for your other weapon and potentially swap back and forward with like 100% uptime. That would of course be like an endgame build. I mentioned that in the interview. It was kind of, you know, explained that that would probably be like the perfect combination of artifacts and stuff, but that is basically a system that allows you to, swap between weapons and kind of encourages you to have that dynamic weapon flow in the combat. So the one you're seeing right now, of course, the character is starting off with the Warhammer and then swaps to the polearm. But of course, there is also another clip later on where you can swap to the longsword. Basically, whatever your secondary weapon is, you can swap to that one, which is nice. So, you might decide to go for something like slow and heavy, like a greatsword or a hammer, and then opt for like your second weapon to be something like a faster weapon, like dual blades, longsword, that kind of thing. But plenty of options. So again, you get to sort of see that play out in this gameplay clip, so I'll let you watch this and then we'll talk about some of the weapon uniques. So picking up with some of the weapons now, of course, jumping over to some like dedicated clips for, the given weapons. If you caught the gameplay video a little while ago, the one that featured Keith Lee, they of course spoke about the dual blades and the longsword. But this time I want to speak a little bit more about the Warhammer, the polearm, and the greatsword. There was actually an accompanying PlayStation article that went out this week that basically kind of spoke about a lot of the stuff that we did in the interview, but they also spoke a bit about the unique behavior for the weapons. So for Warhammers, my personal favorite weapon and the weapon that I am 100% going to be a main for, these of course, they're heavy duty weapons and they hit hardest. They're really good for like dishing out armor damage, taking out like multiple small enemies, and the big focus on these is slow damage but big area of effect blast. So you'll of course see that with a lot of the hits for the hammer, there's a big AoE blast, so if you're trying to sort of take out groups of enemies, this is a good way. But it is worth noting that outside of your normal light and heavy attacks, Warhammers will gain a charge over time. You gain charge faster by attacking enemies, and when the charge is completely full, you can perform one of your two weapon arts. The first technique is a massive energy discharging slam in an area around the player. Meanwhile, your other option is to aim and slam your Warhammer to send a directional shockwave that deals bonus damage at the end of its travel. So that is basically a good way to kind of like use that built up charge. So definitely pretty exciting. For the next one, we're of course talking polearms. Of course, polearms in this game do give you exceptional reach. They are definitely kind of like one of the, it's not necessarily a ranged weapon per se, but it does have the greatest range potential out of all the weapons. So if you did want to play a little bit further afield, then this does of course have that option. The idea with this is that you can drive your opponents backwards. It's a fast weapon, lots of kind of long thrusts and aim stabs and stuff. And of course, if you've seen the weak point attack, then you can quite literally throw your polearm. However, beyond that, outside of your normal light and heavy attacks, polearms have a charge bar that again charges over time, And when the bar is blue, you can perform one of your 2 weapon arts, the first of which is a weapon technique to jump quickly forward and perform an area of effect slam that deals moderate damage, but gets you into the middle of the fight and staggers nearby enemies, so a good way to kind of jump into a crowd. Meanwhile, your second technique is the powerful javelin throw. This attack is perfect for kind of a precision strike from a distance, and again, if you aim this at an enemy's weak point, it's a good way to deal massive damage. And then finally, for the greatsword, much like the warhammers, greatswords are also about incredible strength. They are definitely slower, and it kind of gives you the sort of striking power of a warhammer, but with the precision of a longsword. And of course, depending on the weapon, these swords are just as capable of smashing as they are cutting. However, the greatsword has a charge bar that fills whenever you hit or are hit by enemies. The charge will gradually empty over time, but while the bar is red, you can perform either of the greatsword's unique weapon techniques. The first one is the move which basically launches you forward in a kind of whirlwind, hitting nearby enemies. Meanwhile, the second technique requires more precision as you again aim and launch your greatsword to deal damage to enemies in the path. We've again sort of seen this one earlier on in the clip where you basically throw it towards weak points. Incredibly cool. But that, my friends, is pretty much it for the time being. That is kind of just a quick rundown on some of the gameplay clips that I sort of had a chance to share with you guys, and kind of hopefully by sort of seeing some of it, you know, uninterrupted in sort of full gameplay with audio and stuff, has started to kind of piece together maybe a little better as to how the game may play. There's still a lot of questions that I obviously have, things that I want to sort of find out. I basically just want to dive into the menus and start seeing skill trees, but safe to say, I am personally really enjoying what I'm seeing so far. I definitely can't wait to jump in and play this game. So yeah, keep it locked for plenty more, because of course we've got plenty more Godfall stuff coming your way as we get close to launch. But for the time being, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there if you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with. It's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.